Alright, so demo number 2, we're going to create a cube with some sort of light logic. In this case, it's going to be a more abbreviated version of light logic, and we're going to return with a little bit of our understanding of isometric projections to create this cube, because this cube ends up using a grid. So if you go Control quotation mark, you'll notice in Photoshop it actually brings up grids. And we're just going to use these grids today to actually draw out this shape. So let's go ahead and get into this. So I'm going to go File, New, and I'm going to search for 7x5 at 300 ppi. It's in landscape mode, and I'm going to hit Create. So that's good. So far so good. I'll turn on my grid. Control quotation mark key is right next to the Enter key, so that should be a good spot for you to look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm going to go ahead and first select the entire composition, and I'm going to fill the background with a fairly dark color, and just load it up. Whatever color you want, it's up to you. I would say don't go as dark as like the off canvas color that we see here. Next move, I'm going to make another selection, and I'm going to go less than halfway, but kind of get a good amount of that foreground, just so that when we add it, you got a decent amount of space to actually put your cube. And I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call this one Foreground, F-O-R-E-G-R-O-U-N-D. Bam. It's helpful to build on separate layers so that in case you mess something up, you can always go and modify that particular layer. So I've got a ground plane, I've got a background. In order to blur this ground plane out a little bit, I'm just going to select a little bit of the tip with my rectangular marquee tool. Then I'll go Select, Modify, and then Feather. Again, select, modify, feather, and set it to 10 pixels. Let me do that one more time. Select, so menu bar select down to modify, and then feather. Shift F6 seems to be the keyboard shortcut for that. So I'll do that, set it to 10, hit OK, and then the magic move is to hit backspace. So hitting backspace while you're on the foreground layer deletes part of that gray foreground. If I deselect, you can see it then creates this kind of blurry edge here. So it looks like this is like fading into a distant background. Turn my guides back on, Control quotation mark, and I'm going to zoom back out. So in order to create this cube, the thing I want you to realize is this right here. So 5 by 2, 5 by 2. So over 5, up or down 2. So that arrow can go the other way as well. And that'll create the top plane of the cube, which you can then use to build the rest of this isometric cube. For this purpose, I'm going to use my poly lasso tool. So I'm going to click on that guy. And I'm going to create a new layer and call this top. So let's just call this one top. Actually, we can just call this one cube, C-U-B-E. We'll just build the whole thing on this layer. So here's a cube. And we're going to start with the top plane of the cube. So I'm going to zoom in here. This seems like a nice spot, so let's just like click here. If you haven't set this, you can hit snap or snap to and make sure that your grid is set to snap to. So view down to snap to, and then make sure that grid is set. Okay. So long as that's good to go, then we are good to go. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to go over 5 up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up, 1, 2. I got a new corner. I'm going to work my way back to the left, I guess. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then up, 1, 2, click. I'm going to continue going to my left here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In this case, not up 2, but down 2. 1, 2, click. And then because I already have my starting position and a square has 4 sides, I can just go back to that beginning space. Now I've got the top. Cool. Let's make this one white. So pure white, bright white. Alt backspace, fills it with white. Control D to deselect. Once you have your top, you can basically build however tall you want it to go. And so in this case, I'm going to make it 6 units tall. So I'm going to take my poly lasso. I'm going to start from the same spot, and I'm going to count down 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'm going to count my slope over. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 1, 2. And then you can see 6 straight up would bring me to there. And then I can close the selection. Again, you know the selection is closed when the marching ants are created, that effect of that kind of vibrating line. And this one, because it's the backside, which is going to be further from the light, we want to create a darker value. I'm going to go kind of gray, but maybe not as bright or not as dark as the background, but also not as bright as the ground plane that we're sitting on here. I'll hit Alt Backspace. That's a little too close to the ground plane, so I'm going to make it darker than that. So 70, 69, 69, 69A. 69s, all 69s. And we'll do Alt Backspace. That seems like a better color or a better value. So that's good. We got top, we got right, and now let's do our ISO left plane. So I'm going to start in this corner, and I'm just going to count down 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Pretty much there now. I've already solved the other locations, so now I can go to this corner, to this corner, and to this corner. And again, this is receiving the light side, but if the light's a little bit higher up, this one's just going to be a little bit darker than the topmost plane. So I'm going to go up to white and just kind of drop it down a little bit. I'm at E2, E2, E2. Hit OK. Alt Backspace. And there we go. And so you can kind of see this like slight transition of value from the topmost plane to the side plane there. So good so far. So far, so good. Let's go ahead and build in our cast shadow now. So starting from this corner here, I'm going to count out, I don't know, 6. So let's click here, right from the corner. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's do some more. 7, 8. Let's do 8. That sounds good. And then I'm going to go over 5 up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up, 1, 2. So that brings us to this location. And you can see now these diagonal lines are actually like, they're like matching each other in that direction. All right, so then we can go and work our way back. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then up to 1, 2. Again, these slopes all mimic the same logic that's within the isometric plane. And then these ones are just going to go straight. So like you just continue this line straight until it hits this vertical mark. And because the shadow goes behind the object, we can't see it anymore. And so that allows us to do these, to take these shortcuts. So I hit the object, I come to this corner, and then I close the shape up. And this is kind of like the weird cast shadow that a cube makes when it gets struck with light. Okay, and so this one we're going to go dark. So I'm going to go a bit darker than the background, but maybe not as dark as the far background. Alt Backspace. And I would say probably a little darker than that. Alt Backspace. There we go. So there's good separation between the shadow plane on the cube and the cast shadow that's on the ground. So we're not covering the same exact pieces in the sphere, but in this case, because the cube is so kind of like fundamental, you don't really have to do these like very clean shadings to convey a sense of form on the cube. So we've got our light side, which is where the highlight would be. Highlight kind of moves into the light side, which would then kind of move towards shadow. So shadow to shadow edge to core shadow. Core shadow has maybe some reflected light, so you could put some reflected light maybe in there. And then from the form, it casts its shadow onto the plane, and so here's our cast shadow, which goes from umbra to penumbra to antumbra. And that's where we're going to stop today. This is the target that I want you to shoot for. Draw an isometric cube with light logic in the same way that I've done it here. And there's my grid. Again, control, quotation mark, to turn your grid on and off.